So here we are with the wonderful Ms. Judy Piatkus, who needs no introduction because, of course, she is the founder of Piatkus Books that she sold some years ago. And she's just been awarded Business Book of the Year for her brilliant book, Ahead of Her Time, because, of course, she was ahead of her time. So Judy really is the person who was ahead of the curve in terms of mind-body books. So a lot of the classics that we take for granted in the UK are books that Judy brought to the marketplace and somehow foresaw that there was going to be this huge growth and need for these books with mindfulness, past lives, the mind-body connection, books like Your Body Speaks Its Mind. And then, of course, in fiction, Nora Roberts, hello, biggest selling female fiction writer in the world. So Judy, so delighted to welcome you here today. And our theme for today, because I was thinking about it, there's so much that you could share, so much you could say. And I think our theme is simply my big breakthrough. So if you were to look at a time in your experience that was the big breakthrough, because it would be so useful for all of us to hear that and take what we could take from it for ourselves. Does that make sense, Judy?
Absolutely. Thank you, Fiona.
So, yeah, over to you.
I think breakthroughs are very interesting because we don't aim for the breakthrough. Most people, when they're building a business, they need to have a very clear vision of what they want to achieve. And on the way to your ultimate vision, to achieving it, there's going to be many breakthroughs, but no one can know in advance what the breakthroughs are going to look like, what they're going to feel like, where they're going to come from. So that's actually quite an interesting question to think about. Perhaps one only looks at breakthroughs in the past tense or recognizing that something special is happening. So I think what happens with a breakthrough is it's the break that you've been looking for, but you didn't necessarily know how it was going to come. And I think in your business life, in your career, you're going to have a series of breakthroughs, and some will be smaller, some will be bigger, and some will be really important. And I'm just recording this with Fiona after the Platinum Jubilee concert. And I was thinking, well, if that's not a breakthrough for some of the performers, it was incredible. But if I go back to Piatkus Books, we were lucky in that we had a breakthrough a couple of years after we started, because, excuse me, I loved baking.
Maybe also, you know what I'd love to hear, because there's so many books, you know, because I was listening to the audio version of your book the other day, and there's so many books that took you to the next level. And then another one came along and took you to the next level. So you definitely had this incredible judgment for what was going to work, or what people wanted, or what people needed. So you were definitely in tune with people's needs at the time. But what I'm wondering is, in retrospect, when you look back, was there one particular breakthrough that you could say that really took us to the next level?
My publishing company, Piatkus Books, was in existence for 28 years. So there were breakthroughs at different times. Because I liked baking, I'd come up with the idea of a book called Fast Cakes, which was going to be for everybody who liked to bake and didn't have much time. So you could shove everything in a bowl, quickly mix it up, put it in the oven, and that was that. And we were lucky that we approached Mary Berry, who had a television series at the time, but wasn't such a major figure. And in those days, in the publishing industry, even a small publisher could sometimes afford to pay the advances because they weren't as large as they became a few years later. So our breakthrough to start with was publishing Mary Berry and a book called Fast Cakes, which is still in print today. So we were very proud of that. And that got us started on doing more cookery books. And then the next breakthrough we had, which was much bigger, was with a book called Colour Me Beautiful. And I'm sure that most of you listening here will be familiar with Colour Me Beautiful, which was really a key book that came our way because lots of larger publishers couldn't take it seriously. But our office was mainly women, and women were making the decisions. So we understood the concept of Colour Me Beautiful perfectly. We understood that if a woman wore clothes in a colour that suited her, she was going to look better. And we took on this book from the States, Colour Me Beautiful, and we published it, and we gave it a big promotion, as much as we could afford. And we were very lucky because the Colour Me Beautiful organisation was starting up in the UK at the same time. And there were also many feature magazines, newspapers. Everybody is constantly looking for interesting new material. So the idea that you could dress in colours that suited you really took off. And early in the 1980s, if you went into a dress shop, you would see all the dresses organised according to their size. But after Colour Me Beautiful, when you went into a clothes shop, dresses would be organised in blocks of colour, which made it much, much easier to tell if you were going to find anything in there that suited you. You didn't need to waste your time looking through racks of clothes in the wrong colour.
I remember that so well. The swatches and the summer and the autumn and the winter and all of that stuff. But you and I were chatting before we started recording, and you were talking about a huge decision that you made and how that huge decision made a huge impact on the business. And it was about you taking a decision to really step up in terms of the business, because you were saying a moment ago how important it is to have a vision, and I so agree with you. And it sounds as if you took on a bigger vision for your business, which included at that time taking on a big premises in central London, just off Tottenham Court Road. So tell me about that, because I think that's something that we all could benefit from, whether we're publishing books, writing books or not.
I had started my company, Piatkus Books, in the bedroom of my home at that time in Loughton, Essex. And after a few years, I found myself divorced and a single mother of 3 children. My older daughter has disabilities, and we had taken on a very small office just around the corner from Tottenham Court Road Station. But my vision was that we would have our own office, and that instead of having to pay rent every month, I would be paying off a mortgage. And I was really focused on this. And the reason was, in the 1980s, it was easier to get an overdraft for your business from the bank. But I didn't have any assets. I'd lived in a nice house with my former husband, but we'd had to divide the proceeds from the house. And in any event, I didn't want to risk a house that I was living in with my children. So I thought, if I can get the money together to buy a building, then I will always have an asset, and the bank will lend me money for an overdraft to grow the business. I won't have to have any outside investors. I really didn't want to have outside investors or shareholders, because an earlier experience in my business career had indicated that it can be risky when things don't work out. So the business was doing well, and we had enough to get together a deposit. And I began to look for a small building, and we found a little freehold building in Windmill Street, not Great Windmill Street, just Windmill Street, which is off Charlotte Street, number 5. And we realized we would be able to get together enough money, and the bank agreed to give us a loan. So every month, instead of paying rent, we had a mortgage and we were paying that off. So the building was 2,200 square feet. It had a basement, a ground floor, and then 3 floors on top of that. It wasn't very grand, but it was our own building. And when you're a small company and you want people to do business with you and they come to your office, it might not be the most elegantly furnished office in London. It definitely wasn't. But nevertheless, when I say we, I mean any of the staff, when any of the staff said, well, we do own our building, then people felt a lot more confident about dealing with a relatively new company who they didn't know very much about. And of course, this was the days before the internet. So you couldn't find out much about a company beforehand.
Why do you think that was your big breakthrough? Was it because you made the decision? Was it because you were taking the business more seriously than previously? Because that's a heck of a commitment to buy a building. And I remember that building, because I don't know if you remember, because I actually met you there. We had a meeting, Lord knows how many years ago. So I remember being impressed, the fact that your address was 5 Windmill Street, just off Charlotte Street. So that was like, still is the heart of media land, sort of creative industry, a real hub. Why do you think that? Why would you identify that as your big breakthrough?
It was a big breakthrough because it was an asset, which was different from books. And there's something about bricks and mortar, which is an asset that everybody understands. You might have an amazing stamp collection, you might have a diamond necklace, you might have a Ferrari car or a Porsche or whatever. But there's something about bricks and mortar and a building that gives you an authority in the world of commerce. And I think, at the time, we're talking about in the 1980s when we bought the building, I was a young woman. I was in my 30s. I was running a publishing company. There were very few women in business, and it was harder to be taken seriously. So having an asset like that, a place that people could walk into, see all our books displayed, could visit people in their offices. We were really proud of our building. And, you know, I'm hearing myself talk just now, and I feel proud of it still, even though I no longer own the company and the building was sold many years ago. But yeah, I would say that was a massive breakthrough for me as the owner of this company. So everybody else benefited because it was very much our building. People had a desk, they could put their pictures on it, they could bring whatever mugs they wanted. Everybody had their own space. It was really lovely because, you know, you weren't all lined up. You had energy, you had your own energy and your own space wherever you were sitting. So of course people really enjoyed that. Also, it was very publishing, like that lots of publishers had their own buildings at that time, and they had their own offices, somewhat grander than ours was, but nevertheless it was a very publishing way of operating, so it felt good. So everybody enjoyed that, and the building had a wonderful energy.
I was just about to say that. I do remember that energy. It was such a warm, inviting energy. You know, you could just tell that everybody was actually happy at work, that it was just a great, enthusiastic environment. Here's what I'm curious about. I'm curious whether you made a decision before you signed that lease, because that's a heck of a commitment to actually buy a building in central London. I can't even imagine the expense and the responsibility. But my real curiosity is, did you find yourself making the decision before you took that step that it was a deeper, a bigger commitment to the business? Was it you taking yourself or the business perhaps more seriously?
Well, as I mentioned, I was a single mother, and I was the main support for my children. And the business had to do well. I needed a certain salary to pay the mortgage of the house I was living in. I needed to support the children. I needed to pay the nanny who was looking after them while I was working. And I needed to know that we had enough money every month coming in that everybody would get paid. So cash flow was a big thing. But I thought, if we have a building, if the company gets into trouble, then the building should have enough value that it will support what we do. And, you know, bricks and mortar, it's a wonderful tangible asset. It doesn't always go up, it does sometimes go down, but you can always do something with it. You can sort of rent parts of it out, or if you've got a house, you can take in lodgers. So I felt much more secure as a business owner in the world of commerce, having this asset. It felt like this asset has got my back, as we might say now. It's not a person, but it's as though I had that support behind me. We could afford to pay the mortgage. It was a 15-year loan. It was manageable. And the wonderful thing about the building was it did keep going up in value because I was so lucky to find it. And as the years went by, the building went up in value. And as a result, I was able to increase the amount of borrowings for the company against the building. And I had 15 different bank managers over the time that Piatkus was an independent company. And everybody was always quite easy to deal with because we had the building. So it turned out to be our great good fortune. And did I take the business more seriously? Well, the business had to pay for the food on our table. I always took it seriously. I didn't always take myself as seriously.
So here is what I'm hearing, because, you know, you've got a very specific story, and I want to make sure that everybody listening to this can take some of your success and apply it for themselves. So here is what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm taking from what you've been saying, Judy. I'm hearing the importance of having a vision. I'm hearing the importance of thinking big, and I'm hearing the importance of commit. So, you know, you are a worker. You strike me as a worker. You know, you have the vision, you think big, and then you actually commit. You do the work, you put the work in. Would you say that sounds about accurate, Judy?
I would say that I struggled with vision. I always struggled with vision throughout my career. It took me a while to understand what that meant because I'm very pragmatic. So buying the building, I didn't see that as a vision. I just saw that as a way to have some security behind me and some security for the overdraft, for the capital that we needed to fund what we were doing. But I did struggle with vision. So I knew I wanted to sell a lot of books. I knew I wanted to sell them all over the world. But I sometimes struggled to refine it beyond that. So it was very simple vision.
Well, I think that sounds great. So having a vision that you can grab hold of, having a vision that's simple and that you could even put into a sentence, because what you just said, Judy, was beautiful. You wanted to sell books all over the world. And, you know, listening to your book as I have over the past few days, it wasn't just any old books. It was books that would make an impact on people's lives. You know, you're a very driven person in terms of your impact in the world. And I really want people to listen to this and take away what you're saying in your story and apply it to themselves. A vision doesn't have to be an encyclopedia. It doesn't have to be 10 pages long manifesto. In fact, I think it's better if it's simple, if it's a simple sentence that you can grab hold of, that you can write down, that just rolls off your tongue. And the thinking big and the committing to it is really what I'm taking away from what you're saying today. Judy, would you agree?
Yes, I think that's very fair. And I think that's one of the challenges of vision, that it can just be a sentence. And it's a bit like purpose. I think there is much too much emphasis on purpose, and that your purpose will appear as you get on with whatever it is you feel you should be doing, and particularly if you're following your heart. But even if you're not following your heart, there may be a purpose to what you find yourself doing, which will not become obvious until later in your life. So if you had asked me in my 30s what my purpose was, I would have said it was to sell books. But actually, in my 40s, when purpose became a concept that people began to talk about much more, I realized that my purpose, as a fiction publisher, it was to entertain. As a non-fiction publisher, it was to open people's minds to new ways of thinking. And in fact, at Piatkus Books as an independent, we'd been doing that all the time, but that was not obvious to me. So I was really happy that I hadn't spent too much time worrying about my purpose. And then a year later or so, I mean, a few years later, I think the purpose expanded again. It was to open people's minds to new ways of thinking through reading the books. But for myself personally, I began to speak about things, and I began to get my message out there. So your purpose can be expanding at different stages in your life. And I would say, if you're listening to this and your business is at quite an early stage, just don't worry about it. I think there's much too much emphasis on it nowadays.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with you, Judy, because there's that beautiful Rumi quote, take the step and the path will appear. Like, just get moving, just get going. So what is maybe one final message that you might want to offer someone who may be feeling stuck, or maybe feeling they're not making enough progress in their business? What would you want to say to them?
It isn't easy building a business, and it takes a long time. And if you're doing what you love, then do it as well as you can, because there's never enough good people in the world. And all of us, when we want to find someone, when we want to find a publisher, when we want to find a coach, when we want to find a therapist, we want to find the person who everybody says, oh, they're the one. Yes, they're very good. So your aim is to be that person who's very good. So be professional in every aspect of your business, and don't let yourself down that way. If you're working hard and you're being professional and you're coming from integrity and you've got a vision of what you'd like to achieve, just keep going, and hopefully the universe will help you along the way.
I love that. I love it. So just do the best that you can each and every day. And I love what you're saying, that combination of being professional and coming from a place of integrity. I mean, that's the combination, really, isn't it? That strikes me that you exemplify and always have done, Judy, is that absolute professionalism. I mean, hello, 5 Windmill Street, W1. There's that absolute professionalism and just savvy, just being smart, just knowing that was going to make an impression on people and authors and all of that, but the integrity as well. So I think, yeah, that's what I'm absolutely taking from talking with you today. So Judy Piatkus, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you giving your time to us today.
Well, thank you, Fiona. Thank you so much. And I hope you'll enjoy the book.
I love it.